Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started to be mindful of everyone's time. I'm Laura here at the main library, and we're pleased to offer you our Lunch and Learn series today on coffee equipment. And TJ Roberts is the owner of Kinship Cafe, a Black-owned specialty coffee shop in KCK. They are in the old cupcake facility there across the street from the health department. If you have not gone over there, I highly, highly recommend it. And so TJ started Kinship Cafe last year, I think that's right. And they promote locally sourced products, equity for all. And they do a lot of really interesting activities in their after hours space. So I really, they're creating a really interesting and vital part of our community. And we're happy to be able to have TJ do a live demonstration for you today about coffee equipment. So TJ, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Like you can do thumbs up or just say yes. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we've got music in here and people. So I just want to make sure. Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Well, like Laura was saying, my name is TJ, and first, I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to be here with you guys, being able to share a little about just coffee and knowledge and about what we do here and what we're about in our community. So this should be fun. I'm gonna kind of have some time periods. I have like a timer on my watch. So every periodically, I'm gonna stop and just kind of let you guys ask questions because I know like things can kind of come up. And so Laura, if you don't mind helping me when we get to those parts where we're break points to check the chat and kind of just let me know if there's any questions in the chat, because I know there may be a question that comes up in your head and you're like, oh, I want to ask it right now, but just put it in the chat and we can get to it later when we get to that time. So, all right. So Laura was like, hey, so what are we gonna learn about? What do you want to teach us? And I was like, man, where do I start? There's so much here that we could go into. But I think what would be cool would just, let's start at the basics. So today we're gonna talk about some of the stuff we do here that makes us unique and how we brew coffee with some of the equipment that we use. But also I'm gonna kind of talk with you, and I've talked with Laura, we're gonna work on getting some links to you guys possibly of some things that you could purchase to have sent to your home. If you're wanting to make coffee at home, realistically, my goal is that, you know, if you want to come out with friends and family or maybe set up a meeting with someone, Kinship is perfect for that, where you can come in. We've vamped the space out and we've like literally multiplied the seating space from the prior business, the cupcake shop, by like 6 times the amount. And so, you know, when you want to come out and have drinks, that's what Kinship's for. But I want to encourage people to be able to make coffee at home too, because it's so much cost effective to do it that way. And it can also just create a really good routine around just having good vibes through your day in the morning off with a good cup of Joe. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we do here and then what you can also do at your own house with some of the equipment that you can purchase and make at home. So I'm super excited to share that with you. So we'll start with the basics. Coffee is a really unique situation where it's obviously a plant, but a lot of people don't realize it's actually a fruit. Coffee is the bean of a dried cherry. And so when you go to other countries and you know, you see single origin coffee from Guatemala or from Ethiopia or from, you know, other parts of the world, typically it's handpicked and it's from a dried cherry, and they wash it in different ways. There's processed chemical ways, there's natural ways with just water and sun. And then there's sugarcane processed ways where they actually do that with making decaf coffee. They actually do a reverse osmosis and sugarcane process the beans so that way it's not made as a decaf coffee with chemicals, it's made as a decaf coffee with something that was natural, like sugarcane. So a few things here with what we do and what we offer on the coffee side. We offer a pure sugarcane decaf that's strictly from Colombia. With decaf, and my experience in the coffee space, decaf drinkers don't get the latte and the cappuccinos and the the cafe like time, because many cafes don't really have good decaf, or they have a chemically processed decaf where they take their worst bean and they put it with chemicals, and that's their decaf for you to drink. So we really pride ourselves on the effort made to do this. So we work with a company in Idaho that provides us these sugarcane Colombian beans, and they are delicious. So if you like decaf drinkers will be your spot. So that's one of the cool things about what we do. We just try to keep simplicity in its main way, the way it was designed, and to follow that. So some of the things with equipment is kind of like, that's how you get the best taste of coffee. You get the best taste of coffee from being able to extract the coffee in its simplest form. We're not using like crazy technology. We're not using crazy amounts of chemicals or anything. We are literally just going to use water. And what's with coffee is we have this element of making sure that the way to manipulate coffee is these three things. So this is really important. It's obviously like your liquid, like you can do milk or water, right? You can do hot or cold. We'll get into that a little bit. And then there's the manipulation of how the coffee is actually put through a filter or like into your cup. So those are the three ways that we can truly manipulate coffee to get what we want out of it. And some of the ways, I'm going to turn my brightness up just so I can see better. Some of the ways that we really want to do coffee is the simplest way, and then we get to make our own spin with the flavors and different things like that. But today we're just going to go into how to make a good simple cup of coffee. A couple items that we use, that I use personally at my own house, is a V60. That is what this guy is. With V60s, these have been around for like almost 300 years. So it is probably your most origin way of making coffee. This is a Chinese designed filter. This is called a filter. And so what we do is we take, grind coffee, and we put a filter in here. We put the grind coffee in this, and then we take our water. In this case, that's the other element, right? We take the water and we heat it up, and we pour it onto this right here with water and the grounds in the filter. And then it comes down into this guy here for, someone to enjoy. Some ways to manipulate that is the temperature of the water that you put in. And then obviously like the amount, like do you want a 12 or 16 ounce? A V60, just a little like tip for people that are interested in looking into this, it's like $25 plus tax, $3. And then I think you can get it shipped to you in under 35 on Amazon. There's lots of different designs. There's lots of different colors. It like has zero preference other than what you want. And filters are anywhere from like $3 to $4 for a pack of 25 to 50 of them. We sell filters and we sell drippers. These are another way. It's like a dripper. It's a dripper that catches with a filter the coffee beans and the water. And so we don't sell any V60s, but you can buy V60s online. The reason why I personally use V60s is because it's like the staple in coffee as far as who did it first. There's other versions of V60s out there now, but they're all kind of predicated to do the same thing. Typically, they are a spherical cone where you can kind of have an angle. And what's really nice with that, with our coffee inside, is it allows us to have a simple way where gravity is in our favor. And I love that. That makes for a good, easy cup of coffee. So some of the things that we do uniquely here, I guess I'll get into that later, but this is the V60. Really great for 12 to 16 ounces of coffee. Easy to make. The uniqueness of it with the type of things that you can do with this is the type of water that you would put in. So that leads me to, two different types of water sources here that you can purchase at home. So this is the V60 that you would use to like put your grinds in. And then these are two different types of kettles. Kettles are obviously the best for being able to have something that you can enjoy warm. It's really hard to do coffee out of boiling water from a pot. So I would not encourage that unless you have like 911 ready to dial. So these are really safe measures to do. I have had this guy for like almost 3 years, and we have done pop-ups outside where it's like almost 110 degrees outside, and this guy's still pumping out. It gets up to 212 degrees. Typically takes just a few minutes to do that 212-degree situation. And what's really cool about that is you're able to manipulate on something like this. I can get to the very degree that I want my water to. So for tea drinkers, if you enjoy drinking tea and you're not a big coffee fan, you can still use a V60 for tea. It's not really like popular because typically you steep tea, so it wouldn't taste the greatest. But one thing that's great about these guys is that these are great for tea because you can get like a green tea or even like a black tea that's sensitive to like temperature. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but you can burn your tea. And so tea has different temperature ratings to be steeped at because of the potency of the tea and the flower. And so what's nice with something like this is you can control it to be as low as like 135 all the way up to 212. And so your green teas are going to be that 160 to 175 range, and your black teas are going to be anywhere from 185 to 195. Every once in a while, you'll get a black tea that you'll throw over 200, but very rarely does tea accept hot water over 200. So that's really cool with this guy. And it's just one that like literally just sits on top of something that plugs into a wall. And like I said, takes about 2 minutes to warm up to that desired temp that you would like. So that's, this is made by Fellow. I believe when I purchased this guy, it was $145 or $150 when I purchased it. They have one that's kettle-less. So they have one that literally is just the kettle and it can sit on your stovetop, and those are $70. They come in a lot of different colors too. So I'll try to get you a link or let you guys know about that if you're interested. But they're, like I said, a really great product that you can get some really neat stuff on. Then we have the other tea kettle, but if you kind of notice, guys, this is a really important thing, and it helps big time with the quality of coffee that you're going to receive, is actually the stouts, the tips. If you kind of see the tips here, this is typically used for tea. This is our traditional tea kettle, and it's really the shape of the bell and the pour. Realistically, when we get into like something like V60s, and when we talk later about Chemexes, one of the things that are really popular is the pour over method. There's that sounds really pretentious. A lot of people like have heard of pour over methods when they go into like a coffee shop and they see someone like, in a corner, like a barista in the corner, like, just drilling some water over some beans. That's a pour over. There's thousands of methods, and we were talking earlier about the methods of water. Well, one of those methods and manipulations that you can create with coffee is the timing of how you pour your water out. And so when we talk about timing, really we want to then control how much water we're controlling out of our stout, or that's coming out of these tips, to make really good coffee. And there's like thousands of methods, guys. You could look on Google and you could see thousands of methods with like, okay, you're going to pour 50 grams at 30 seconds, and then you're going to let it sit for 5 seconds, and then you're going to go every 30 seconds, 80 grams. There's so many different methods that people use. There is no wrong one. It's just your own preferential. Realistically, you can go online and look up like just a simple 12-ounce pour over method and probably follow that and maybe tweak it to your own liking. There's methods that we like to use, and we'll talk about that later in the coffee hour series throughout these next few weeks. So hang tight for those. I want to leave you something to come back to. But what's cool with these and the tea kettle, so this is kind of what's unique. The tea kettle, if you kind of look, and I brought this guy, this is called a Chemex. A Chemex is probably like, if this is the father of coffee, this is its grandson. So he's bigger, but trust me, he's a little behind. He came around in the 1940s is when this guy came around. And realistically, this is during war times, guys, when there was not like a way to store a lot of stuff. So this was a lot easier to store for people during war, as they were like in camp. How do we make coffee? Let's just make something quick like this. And that's how the Chemex really came about in the 40s. It's kind of neat. So one of the cool things with these tips though, is if I'm pouring out of this guy, I don't have that much control because of the volume and size of this diameter and the length of the distance from the capacity in the storage container of all the water and where it's going to go out of. So when I'm pouring out of a tea, it's honestly like a dump, right? I'm dumping all of it out. When we're doing teas, you know, if we're doing a loose leaf tea, we measure our loose leaf teas in grams, and then we put the desired amount of water that we want. But it doesn't matter about timing because the tea is going to steep. So that's why they make steep. They call this a tea kettle because we're just dumping the water. With this guy, okay, it's way different. I can control, and I'm not sure how good you can see, but I can control how much or how little my water comes out. And so with that control, that gives me all of these ways to manipulate the pour over method while I'm adding water to my grinds of coffee to really deliver my desired flavor of what I want to get from it. So it's kind of a unique thing where we get into the kettle space. This is also an electric kettle that you can just set up on top. We sell this here. It's discounted from what you can see and find pricing online for. Realistically, because we got it for free and I don't need to make money on it. So I want people in our community to enjoy it. So we have it 20% off from what you see online. And that's with all of our barista products because we believe that we want to make things accessible because we think this community hasn't had the opportunity to learn this stuff. And it's proving to be a fact. So as we go on through this, there's like things like that where I'm going to say like, hey, this is something that we'll do here. And then we also do coffee classes. That's one of the things we do after we close. And so you can always tap in for more there too. But this is a tea kettle and it pours out fast. This is what we call our gooseneck kettle. Okay, you see there, it's a gooseneck and it's for pour overs. So let's real quick open up to any questions and I'll get set up for the next thing. So is there any questions or does anyone in the chat have any questions? So far, we're good?
Well, while we're waiting for that, TJ, tell them about your history with coffee.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've been in the coffee space since 2018, but my first cup of coffee was when I turned 10 and I was at my dad's church and he asked me to make coffee for the church. And so I would show up. I also played drums for the church band. And so I would get to the church like as the first person there. I'd make the coffee for the band and then I get to make the coffee again for the church. So what was cool about that is I think with me and my early relationship with coffee, I didn't drink coffee as a kid because, you know, that's not a thing. But on Sundays, I definitely did because I got to make it. So I would just be like wired AF all Sunday from all the coffee. And now I don't drink really any coffee. I drink maybe honestly like I was just telling someone today, like maybe 10 to 12 ounces a day of coffee. And there's days when I don't drink any at all. So but professionally, my experience with coffee has been focused in the area of working with like roastery and messenger. And so since 2018, I started working with roastery and then not sure if you guys know about everything that's happened since the pandemic, but when the pandemic happened, it really put some of our major local market coffee companies in some trouble. And so a lot of them actually binded agreements together. And so now there's a company called Fairwave, and it is owned by Roastery, Messenger, Black Dog, Filling Station, and Ibis Bakery. So all 5 of those companies are now married into one company. And that's why when you go to Roastery, you can find Ibis Baked Goods. And when you go to other places, you can see other products kind of intertwined. When that pandemic happened, at the time, I was running an insurance business prior to all of this and was working part-time in coffee at the roastery. Because of my experience in work and running a business and the work that I did with that was also in the community, and that was in Mission, Kansas at the time, my work and responsibilities quickly translated and elevated as a part-time like utility guy at Messenger Roastery. And so basically I started working at all the cafes that they have, all of those mentioned. And I started helping all of their managers. And I started helping their staff and I started helping menu items and basically implementation of new drinks, new flavors, new things like that. And so over the years over the last year, I was doing that. And then this opportunity came on my lap. And Greg and Celeste from the Cupcake Company reached out to me. They had friends that reached out to me and said, hey, we think you could put this coffee idea to practice finally and do that in KCK. And here we are. So it's been one hell of a ride. It's definitely not for the week, but I've enjoyed every second of it. So is there any other questions?
Here's a good question. Does water matter, bottled or tap?
If you really are that pretentious, which whoever's asking this might be, and I am too, so don't feel bad. Water does matter. It does absolutely matter. At first we were originally running, and I'm gonna grab it real quick because it's something you can get from home. When we first opened up, guys, we had ordered our coffee machine in July of 2021. And it's when I was looking at coffee machines, and we'll go to that and I'll talk and break down the equipment in that. But when I first started, we had to wait till it got here. And so we had to use this guy. And so what I noticed, to answer your question with water, is we were just using tap water for this guy. And this was making coffee from October all the way to the beginning of February. So you can get this machine. It is a Bonavita. It made us about $25,000 between October and January period. And it is a workhorse, to just give you that bottom of the doubt. So it's called a Bonavita. It's typically about $150. It has a pour over method internally. So it takes the water from this capacity here and it keeps it heat, and it heats it up to 202, which is one of the only machines that actually can run up a high heat like that. And then it actually has percolators here that actually drop water onto, and you can do a Chemex setup where you can just literally slide your Chemex in, or it comes with a kit where it comes with a pot and a filter carafe on top. So it's kind of neat to be able to like use other products to see things like, this is what would be like a commercialized pour over. If I was gonna say something, this would be like this commercialized pour over. But water made a huge difference, because one of the things that is pretty known with tap water is that it's really hard. And so what happens with coffee and hard water is it scales really bad. And when I say scale, think of like stains. It just leaves really, really, really bad stains. And so we were using a ton of Descaler, which is a chemical material that we use to clean our scaly stuff so we can keep having fresh coffee. And I bought filters on the new coffee machine that came in, and it was a double osmosis water filtration system that hits the machine, or hits the water before the water hits the machine. And immediately we don't really have to use any descaling chemicals. And obviously, like, we're able to deliver something that's way more consistent over time. So the only thing that's different is you just have to change, those filters. John, I can see you got a question. I think you're muted, John, unless I'll go.
Yeah, a quick question. Something came to mind because I do use tap water from the sink. And I don't know if it's related. This is what I'm asking, because when I wash the decanter or whatever I'm using, there's a brown light tint that's left. After, even if I rinse it as much as possible, I have to really scrub it to get rid of this brown tint. Now I'm wondering, if I use bottled water, would that not happen? It only happens with water from the tap, or would it happen either way? Period.
So that's a good question. So your water particles in tap have a lot more particles for the scaling to happen than you do from a bottled water filtered water situation. So you would have a little less issues. But to be honest, that also is going to come in time, depending on how often you use that. So prime example is people that come in and give me a mug for their coffee. If they order a drip coffee, I don't care how, that mug could be used for 3 or 4 days. It's going to always probably carry that brown residue in it.
No.
And the only way to probably remove that would be a chemical called Kafiza. It's not something though, that residue isn't something that's going to be harmful to you or is going to even really taste much different. I also kind of equate it to like barbecue. When you start using your grill and you just continue to use it, it starts building up that residue a little bit. And it's kind of like that cast iron when you're prepping the cast iron to prep to use. It's building that flavor profile internally. There's some of that matters in some of these things, but you do want to make sure that you are running a very clean, tight ship, especially with coffee grounds, because if you're not doing it right, you can get some fungi, and he's not fun. So to answer your question, John, I would just, it's preferential, but I would say if you did change the bottle, I will tell you, you will notice a difference first cup.
Okay, all right.
No doubt.
Here's,
Yeah, that's a great question.
here's another great question, TJ.
Okay.
For people that came to the coffee realm during the curing time,
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't come in a K-cup, I don't know what the right measurements are. So what is an appropriate water to grind ratio?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. On those K-cups, there's unique ways to kind of manipulate those to work more in your favor as if you didn't have K-cups. What I've messed with over the years, and this is I got off the K-cup for a long time, so I'm sure it's evolved even more. But they used to have these eco-friendly K-cups that you could put filters in and replace. Those are what I would perceive to be the best. The hardest part with K-cups is it's not enough coffee for the amount of water that you're using. And so you're automatically getting less caffeine than what I could give you or anyone else. And that's also regulated by the food distribution, like whoever governs that too is they created a place to do that. And if you're looking for, I see here at the bottom, like look for grind ratios. Typically on grind ratios, you're looking at, let me kind of dive into that. The grind ratios they vary. You could have a small to a large grind, and we'll go into grinders today just a little bit because I brought two that we'll go through three of them. But one of the things with grind to ratio is typically on your grind to ratio, it's weight to water. It's not grind to water. So you're looking for grind weight to the amount of water, and typically it's 8-to-1. So if you're doing like you're doing 16-to-1, sorry. And if so, like for us, we use 215 grams, or we'd use 115 grams for every gallon and a half of drip coffee that we make. So we measure, and I would recommend to use a scale. Lots of people like maybe use like measuring cups or situations like that. Those can be fine if that's all you have. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just going to be harder for you to maintain consistency because bean sizes change. And so you could get your favorite bag of coffee beans every month, and every bean would be different size every time you got that new bag. And so if you did a half cup of beans, it may be like 130 beans, but then your next bag that you get has a different bean size and it's 140. There's going to be a difference in the way that comes out in delivery. So we always err on weight and weigh on weight. And so we sell scales here that are just simple smart scales that have a black backlit that are like $12. It's read in grams and also in ounces. And so if you are able to find a digital scale that reads down to the 0.5 or 0.2, that's solid. Typically you can find those scales on Amazon for under 20 bucks and they're solid. What's even better is if you can find a scale that has a timer built into it. Our scales do have timers built into them if you're like looking to get those. Those are super beneficial, so you understand like your steeps and your pour over methods and different things like that. But when we're talking grind to ratio and how much coffee do I use, on a 12 ounce, we're typically using 24 grams of coffee. On a 16 ounce, we're using 32 grams of coffee. And the reason why I know that your K-cup's not getting that is because your K-cup is basically like 3 to 4 ounces. So that's not going to be enough compared to what you get from just ground coffee. And also that had been ground months ago, you know, and then compacted and vacuum sealed into this pod for you to consume. And that's why I would prefer, like, if you were going to enhance your K-Cup experience, go the Ecos pod route, where you can stuff it with whatever coffee you want and just like wash it out and replace it. Some of those have like thin layered meshing like screens to like keep the coffee out, or you can just go to a filter. Preferably, I would go to a natural paper filter that's gonna work well for you. And then I would try to compact that thing as tight and as much as possible. So you get as much coffee in there as you can, so you can have like the right ratio. That's probably the best way for those ratio to coffee questions. So let's go into a little bit more of the grinding, because that was a good question too. This is what I call Boss. This is the Baratza. It's about $150. But I've had this guy for 4.5 years. It comes with warranties as well. A lot of coffee equipment comes with warranties. Really what's important with the type of grinders that you get is a lot of people can get like food processors and things like that. We have food processors here, but we use it for food. We don't use it for coffee. So what's different between a food processor grinder and a grinder like this, obviously, is the way it looks, but ultimately too, the one thing is that this is made with a burr grinder. And if you want to research what a burr grinder is, just Google a conical burr grinder. And basically what it is they put burrs together that are made out of iron, and they etch them together to where they're a tight fit, where they're literally like no very small space. And what they do is they kind of just work together. Obviously they're grooves, and those grooves in the beans and those spaces just get crushed and put into a fine dust that we would see in something like this. So one of the things that is different with a processor is the processor is not going to have this opportunity, because beans are going to fly everywhere. And as a bean like hits the blade as it's going around, it's blowing up into like a million pieces. And so there's no way of, when someone asks about grind size, that's the only size that you can get. Like if you just continue to run that food processor for another minute, sure, you'll get the dust I guess you want, but it's still not going to be consistent dusting all the way through like something like this. So what's cool with this is this guy has different grind sizes, so you can grind coarse or super fine, and it's just a simple twist of the notch. So what you would do with grind sizes in a better, maybe more advanced person would say, like, you know, why would I want to have different grind sizes? Well, you have French presses, you have different brew methods like pour overs, AeroPresses, Chemexes, V60s. So every single type of coffee, even from the region, has maybe a specific way it could be ground to get its best flavor. So some coffees, like when we make our drip coffee and we make our cold brew coffee in house, we use a very loose, coarse grind. So we want big beads, because we want, with cold brew, the water sits with those beans, and those beans are aerating. And so we want them to be really compact, so we can put a lot of water in there and just fill it up and let it marinate overnight. We brew our cold brews for 12 to 24 hours, depending on how much time I got. And then we do another method, which is kind of cool. It's a method that you don't see often in coffee industry, is Flashbore. Cold brew, we make cold brew, we put it in this. It's basically, we put a huge tea bag in this guy, and then it's got a little cork top that we would put in. And then we put a filter on this lower ring, if you can kind of see in there. We put a filter in there, and basically put a large tea bag in here. We put our desired amount of coffee grind that we weigh out, so we have that consistency, right? And then we have large bead grinds that we throw through our grinder, and we put that all in here. And then we have a pour method for the cold brew, and then we put everything in. And it's pretty fun. It's like really cool. So we'll sit this overnight in our fridge, and it just processes cold like you would process tea. What's different between this and like a flash brew is our cold brew is with the water is with beans for almost, like I said, 12 to 24 hours. So you get a ton of caffeine. This is actually a recipe for concentrate. So if I was like to take this right out of the fridge after it was brewed and put it in a cup and sip it, I might literally die. Like it would not be a very enjoyable experience for my bathroom or for myself or my spouse, or like it would just be terrible. So don't do that. But these toddies are like $56 online. They come with a kit. They come with 20 bags that you can make. And it makes about 2 gallons of cold brew makes about 2 gallons of cold brew at a time. So you can get a lot of cold brew. But if you think about how much money you spend on cold brew when you travel and you order a cold brew, $7, $6, $5, whatever that is, you're actually getting something most often than not that's probably in a canister. It's probably something that comes out of a tap. And so the shelf life on that is probably, I mean, you have no idea when it was roasted or made or whatever. If you can make something from home, you know exactly when you made it. You know exactly if you bought a bag fresh off like Roastery or Messenger, they roast their coffee every single week, made fresh and put on their shelves. So you're literally grabbing a coffee that was probably roasted a few days ago. And now you're enjoying it in a delicious cold cup with your desired amount of water and milk and flavor. It's so much fun when you can really get to do this stuff at home. But that's how we make our cold brew. With our flash brew, and what I was trying to say with the caffeine nation like incline is the amount of time the water is with the beans. Since the water is with the beans overnight with this guy, which one do you think has more caffeine, right? Cold brew, because it's with it all the time, right? This guy with our flash brew, we actually just do a pour over on ice. And it's a really cool chemical reaction that's started and stopped and brewed by hand, where you can get the most freshest cup of coffee that's cold just on ice on a pour over, as opposed to something that's processed overnight. It has a ton of caffeine and might even be really acidic because of the way that it's processed. With this, the acidity and the caffeine nation is just a little bit less by probably, I would say, when we dilute this to a cup, it's probably 100 milligrams less of caffeine. So not a lot, but enough to know the difference if you're a huge caffeine junkie. And so what's cool with the flash brew is it's just a super crisp, super smooth process. With cold brew, since it's with the beans overnight, you're gonna get the fullness, the full body of the bean, where you're gonna get its bitterness, you're gonna get its light crispness. If it's got citrus, you'll get that, floral, you'll get that. With this, you'll get all of those notes, except you won't get the bite and the bitter. Because of the chemical reaction where I was telling you guys at the beginning, we can manipulate water by temperature. And so if we're pouring hot water over beans into a filter and it's coming down here, if there's no ice down here and the water is still 200 degrees, what do you think could happen? It's probably going to continue to rebrew. It still has the oils, it still has the caffeine, it still has the coffee and the fat. And so even though the filter did its best to catch all of that, and as we were pouring it through the coffee through the filter, even though the filter caught a lot of that, it's still at a temperature where all of that can just be recreated. And so what's unique with the flash brew is if we put ice down here, that temperature eliminates that from happening. And so now we're flashing the caffeine and we're creating this chemical reaction with the coffee that delivers the smoothness that you'll get with the finish of what you pour. So it's really, really cool and it's super fun. It almost looks like tea, but I promise you it's not, and I promise you it's delicious. It's in our Jazzy Bell and people love it. So it's a fun drink to make and it's a fun drink to just consume. I tell people, if you love pour overs and you like, why would you want to make a pour over? Because literally, we took a whole bean, we ground it down through the Baratza and we put it on a filter. It's the most fresh way to get hot coffee. If we did the flash pour, guys, it's the freshest way to get cold coffee. Nothing's going to beat that. So we want to provide that freshness and it's super fun to do that. So that's the Chemex and the V60 and the toddy, the Baratza. We're going to go to the back behind the scenes. Oh, real quick. How do you guys store your beans? This is a question for you guys. How do you guys store your beans? How do you store your beans at home?
Freezer.
Freezer. Okay. Anybody else have any answers? You can put it in the chat.
I have it in like a plastic container.
Okay.
It comes in, it's sealed, and then I take the aluminum off of it and I keep it in there. I don't really do much other than take it out of there.
I keep it in the bags or put it in a ceramic vacuum sealed, depending on how long before I open it.
Okay. That's good. Those are all great. Those are all great things. Looks
Hello?
like, yeah, go for it.
Oh, yay. No, I store mine in a dark, cool place.
Okay.
Oh,
They'll either be in the container or a metal tin can, but always stored in a dark, cool place.
Okay. So we're on to something. Was that Marlena? Is that you, Marlena? I think that was Marlena. So Marlena is on to something. So you're right. Dark is important. The biggest factor with roasting and making sure your coffees maintain its lifetime is actually sunlight. Sunlight actually does some unique things where your coffee has a very thin skin that's over it and it's that fragile. So sunlight over time can be really bad where it ages and pulls that caffeine and like that energy just out of the caffeine, out of the bean. It's such a unique thing. Cold and the temperature is not that important, believe it or not. The reason why cold and why people may think cold would be best is because humidity is a factor. Humidity is a major factor with coffee. When we start our mornings, like this week, when we started our mornings at 75 degrees with 40%, 50% humidity, and then within a few hours, it was 95 to 97 degrees, super sunny, right? And like 100% humidity. We actually had issues with our beans here and the way that our coffee was tasting, and we had to actually on the fly change how we were grinding our coffee, changed how we were creating our ratios, so that way we could deliver the same consistent taste that we had every single time. That is literally how much it can manipulate and change just in a matter of hours with humidity. And so with our door opening up, shut and close all the time with people coming in, then yeah, the humidity is going to be a factor. So realistically, it's just the sunlight that's a factor. So if you store it in a cabinet, that's perfect. If it's in a clear situation, that's perfect too. If it's as long as it's in the cabinet, doesn't necessarily have to be in a cold place or a hot place. It's just best to be in a container altogether, vacuum sealed if you can. There's a couple of things I'm going to show you guys that are really helpful when you're coming to store beans. So one is, we call it an Airscape. What Airscape is what's really cool with Airscape. These are like $30 to $40, $50 if you get bigger ones. But what's cool is on the inside, and they come in a lot of different colors. But what's cool is they actually have this vacuum seal top that comes out before, and then your coffee's inside. And so what's really cool is every time you push this guy in, it's taking all of the air out, and then you're able to vacuum seal it like that. Set it on your kitchen table, and it looks kind of nice. You know, it's kind of cool. So there's that guy. And then I'm going to show you in the back some other places that you can store coffee. Come with me. This is the fun stuff. Okay. Sorry, it's a mess. We're in the middle of work. Okay, so one of the things that we store coffee in is these plastic totes. Now we have to store large amounts of coffee. So this is the best way we have seen fit to be able to store that. So that way it's easy to pour into these little guys, and we ratio out every single cup of coffee or every single batch of coffee that we have. So if we're in a rush, it's just easy to pour in and grind, and we'll get into some of those things. So some of the equipment that we have, and I'm just trying to watch the time. So this is a really cool thing. It's a Ditting Grinder. It's really loud. I'm gonna turn it on just real quick for a sec, just so you can hear it. So it can be pretty loud. One of the cool things about this grinder, in my personal story, is that it was free. Someone gave it to me knowing that I was trying to open up Kinship Cafe, and they said, "Hey, you're trying to open up a coffee shop. This thing doesn't work. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, man, I'll take it." And he brought it over to my insurance office at the time and literally just didn't have it plugged in. And when I plugged it in, it turned on just fine. And I said, "What do you want for it?" And he said, "Man, I just want to see you do good work in the community." So this is the old red. This cool guy here is our Fetco Tower. It makes all of our drip coffee. What's the coolest thing about this guy is it is a hoss, if you haven't noticed. It takes up this whole dang table. One of the things we were talking about with water, check this out, my filtration system. Yeah, we're making sure we got clean water going into this machine, helping the prolongness of the life of the machine. but also just making sure we've got some good stuff serving up every time. So what's cool is this guy has a timer. It makes sure that it couldn't pour like coffee if it was like this, where it's not all the way in. It's got some smart capabilities there. We've got different brew sizes if we wanted to, and it's just really fun to work with. We ordered this guy and he just got in February with our espresso machine, but we were so glad. I'm so glad this is making coffee and not that little Bonavita. Let's just say that. So this is what we make our coffee station on. It's really fun. Then over here, sorry. One of the cool things that we have is this is our other grinder. This is our espresso grinder. It's a peak grinder, Malkonig. It's a German brand, has been around for over 30 years making grinders. I love the way it looks, if I'm just being honest, but these grinders go for $3,000, so they are not cheap. People say, can I get decaf? And I go, when I have another $3,000, I will have your decaf espresso lattes all for you. But at the time being, that's what we're working with. And it's a lot of fun. It pumps out some crazy amounts of coffee. So one of the cool things, and I'll show you here real quick how easy it is literally it's all censored. And you'll see here on this timer, it's gonna time my grind. So that's a single shot right there. Actually, this is a double shot. Everything from our shop comes out in double shots. And that's just a good way for us to measure the consistency of caffeine that we're serving. We would then take this guy, put it like this. This little guy is a tamper. And we put him on top of here and we tamp him. And then we put him into this guy. That's our, what do we call this guy? This is our, the name just left me. It'll come to me. Oh, this is our group head. Thank you. This is our group head. So this is our espresso machine. This is perfect segue. This is Larmozocco. This is strictly from Italy. We had it made in Italy and shipped from Italy to us. It came on a wood crate. I felt special when it came. So what was cool with that was it's a 2 group head, 2 steam wand espresso machine that they've made. And what's really neat is it's got tons of power for us to be able to steam lattes and chais and different things like that. So it can basically run both of these at the same time at any. So we have parties over here. If you need smoke machines, we got it for you all day. Really fun stuff. It's just a turn of a knob, real simple. This guy holds 5 gallons of water in it. It is 185 pounds. It is not something to play around. We had to double enforce this table to make sure he wouldn't fall through. We were talking about water. Boom, filtration system, clean water all the time going to our stuff here. So that's a cool thing. But the group heads here and what we do with our coffee, if you notice, and what's different with espresso than drip is how fine we grind this coffee. This coffee is literally like dusting. You know, if I blew right now or sneezed right now, it'd just get everywhere. But what's cool is when it goes into this guy and that tamp is put on, what happens in this group head up here is it's actually creating a cap over this guy, and in the middle of that cap there's a hole that they push water through, and that water then goes through this screen, evenly distributed through this compact capped we call this, what do we call this? I don't know why I'm dropping names here, but it's in the chamber and it's pushing water through these little holes. I don't know if you can see them, those little holes, and it's going through and it's coming out of this guy. But what's happening in this chamber, guys, is it's pushing water out fast enough for it's pushing water out extremely fast, extremely hot, and also very hard. And so it's got to be able to get it through the screen and give me a 1 to 2 ounce shot of espresso to go into a drink. So it's a really unique and cool thing to have, where we didn't have this for, well, yeah, we got it in February, like I said. So from October to December, all we had was drip coffee, cold brew, flash brew, and chai. And then finally he came. So we love this guy, the Llama Rizzoco. He's a workhorse. He's been in the game for probably almost 70 years. This company has been, and they are the leading brand in espresso machine design, engineering, and make. So it's between this and another brand called Simonelli. Simonelli is also a popular brand, but what we didn't want is a lot of service calls, and we were worried if Simonelli that might be the case. So this guy is solid. One of the cool things, it's full analog. So one of the things, you can go to coffee shops and they have ones that have digitals, they have ones in scales. Realistically, coffee, like we were talking about, to carry consistency, you measure the shots in weight, not in just like visual eyes. For now, we do everything timed. And so I measure everything prior to everything getting open and started, and we try to measure in time 30 seconds to deliver the same consistency of flavor and the amount of caffeine in every drink. So it's pretty fun, but there's a lot of science behind it. And I think for the most part, I think that's, does anyone have questions? This is a good breaking point.
So TJ, here's another question about water.
Yeah.
Does my refrigerator's water filter do the same thing as bottled water?
Yes and no. Like your bottled water is gonna have, again, your bottled water is gonna have less particles than your actual filtered water from your refrigerator, but that doesn't mean it's not good. It's still just, the source is still the tap. So it just depends on how good and it could also depend on your refrigerator. So it just, those things are big factors. And again, like realistically, the taste that you're gonna, if you're a coffee snob like me, the taste that and the difference will be the freshness. You'll know, you'll just be like, wow, this is, when it hits the tongue, it's there. And that's the freshness that you'll get from a good source of water. But that's a great question. Do we have any other questions, guys, or even about the coffee here that we serve? Do you guys have any questions about that? Like what kind of coffee we serve, what type of coffee we serve, anything like that? And then what would be like, just some homework for me to work on, what would be some pointers that I could leave to Laura to have possibly emailed out to everyone? Would there be any information you'd want to know, where to get this, where to get that?
What I might do, TJ, is when I review the recording, jot down some names of equipment and stuff like that. And I may send that to you to proof, and then I could email that out to everybody for those that are interested.
That sounds great, Laura. I saw there was a coffee checklist. I need those. I need a coffee checklist. You want a funny story, Laura? The first art walk in KC was at Epic Studio, and I showed up to do flash pours, and we were just doing samples, and I left my filters. I did not have a good coffee checklist. I left my filters at home, and I made coffee with napkin filters that day, and people loved it. It was hilarious. I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting.
Here's another question. Do you explore different regions for different types of beans? And if so, where outside the US have you inquired?
So I haven't been outside the US personally to go check out farms or to be at a farm to check out different regions, but in the cuppings that I do, and that's one of the things that kind of benefit. We're going to be doing some cuppings here this summer that would allow you to taste that coffee from those regions as fresh as possible. without actually having to pay to go there. So we're going to be working on that. But cupping sessions are really cool to have single origin coffee, sourced coffee at, because you can get coffee from different elevations. So elevations are going to be a large change or difference in like how the coffee is going to come out. Also the soil, if it's a rainforest, if it's something that's a little bit more dry, like a desert, that would be a different type of coffee. There's also from different regions. Your Asian coffee is a completely different coffee bean and cherry than your African and your Colombian or the Hispanic Spain areas of coffee. So you do have two different bean origins that deliver completely different taste profiles. Your most common in the US are going to be the Spanish, Latin American focused coffee beans, because those are most commonly used for like sweeter beverages, sugar beverages. They blend better with milks. Your other coffees from your regions of Asia, even like Russia, parts of Japan, those are going to be a lot more bitter and a lot more acidic coffees. They typically only brew those in dark. So you got like your Turkish coffees, your Kazakhstan, your Saudi Arabian. Those coffees are brewed with a completely different bean origin and have a completely different flavor profile, which is like why like there's certain cafes. There's a Vietnamese cafe called Cafe. They balance to be more approachable into the market. They use the Robusta bean process, which is their Asian swing of beans. And basically they're super bitter. And so they use a sweet milk which is a condensed sweet milk that's usually like a sesame seed, rice milk situation, and adds that to the coffee to balance out that bitterness with the sweetness. So everyone who loves Starbucks can still go get them. Really, really great people, really smart people in the coffee space too. But there are definitely going to be different taste notes from different regions, and cupping is going to be the best way for you to get those without having to pay for that. Some places that I would personally want to go to is like Panama, Guatemala, Ethiopia, obviously, and Brazil are the ones to name a few, but I would be inclined to want to go check out areas where coffee is not like a very popular thing. So I would prefer to go to like Sumatra, Madagascar, Chile, different places like that, to just even Honduras and Haiti to try different flavors of profiles from things that people would not get around here often. So when we get into roasting, that is our focus, to bring those types of flavors and regions to KCK.
Well, TJ, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy lunch schedule there for helping us. We will see you again in 2 weeks on the 27th for part 1 of our pour over techniques.
Yeah, we're going to go over pour over methods, guys. We'll go through some of the equipment to touch up on. We'll go into a V60 and a Chemex, and then we'll probably even talk a little bit about our cold brew method, since it's pretty simple. I can kind of show through, and maybe if you're wanting to make cold brew and stuff, we'll give you some tips and recipes on how to do that from your house.
Good. And everybody's homework in the next 2 weeks, just go to Kinship Cafe. They got wonderful pastries, I know from experience, great coffee, great lunch. And then we'll meet back here in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Laura, and everyone for being on. Appreciate everyone.